Yeah, and I think even if they were to outperform mildly, on a risk or volatility adjusted basis, that would still be like a weak victory, right? So it's like when I imagine the range of outcomes, I can imagine them say moderately or mildly outperforming, T bills or short duration T notes. I can picture them kind of equaling it. I can picture them mildly underperforming with a lot more volatility, which would
Mhm.
be bearish. Or I can picture, in the most bearish case, a pretty significant underperformance. And so while I don't really have conviction on which one of those scenarios plays out, when I just look at the probability spectrum or the risk reward analysis of owning too many of those versus owning some of these more defensive yield generating assets, it's just not super compelling to me. Now, that's not to say that I'd be 100% in cash either. I mean, I
Yeah, yeah.
think there's still other equities that are attractive. And if anything, it's kind of an interesting mix where cash equivalents and really scarce things, that's kind of a good mix right now, almost like a barbell approach. Because if you do get a uptick in inflation that goes against some of your cash equivalents, your energy companies, your Bitcoin might do pretty well. Whereas, your equity, your cash equivalents are potentially still holding up better than they would, say, against long duration bonds or large tech stocks. So, when things do get super deeply oversold, I'm not one to really bet against them too much too aggressively. So I'm not saying like, go out and short bonds here. I mean, if anything,
Yeah.
I've been a bond bear for years, and this move is
Mhm.
even surprising to me in terms of how bad they've done nominally. So I'm not exactly going to I'm not going to press the negative bond trade right here. But I just don't think it's still, you have to, if you're going to trade that market, you have to be very careful. And I think the same is true for the very large tech stocks. That some of them I think are worth owning. Some of the less egregiously overvalued ones I think can still hold up. But when you look at some of the biggest darlings in the market, just the 5 year forward expectations of those, especially when adjusting for downside probabilities, is just not that attractive to me.
Finance expert Lyn Alden dives deep into the complexities of the global financial system. With insightful analysis, she discusses the challenges faced by developing countries in the modern monetary landscape. Alden sheds light on the historical context, citing examples from the past 150 years, and emphasizes the impact of technology on the evolution of money. She explores the centralization and abstraction of currency, revealing how it has led to a system where only a handful of countries have successfully developed. But here's the catch. Alden hints at a technological shortcoming that has far-reaching consequences, creating problematic incentives in the process. Stay tuned to uncover the full story and gain a fresh perspective on the world's financial intricacies.
Ever since the dawn of the telegraph, specifically the adoption of the telegraph, you've had the need to abstract money, right? So gold was no longer able to move around and be verified at the speed with which global commerce was occurring. And so, one of the books that I referenced in my book was Jevons' 1875 Money and the Mechanism of Exchange. And the reason I liked it is because, this is, for reference, this was like 9 years after the first cross Atlantic telegraph. It had only been like, maybe 20, 25 years of the telegraph being widely used in Europe. And he documents kind of the history of money. So in many ways, his book was similar to mine, just the 1875 version, where he's going into the history of money and then he's examining the current system and explaining the pros and cons of how it works. And what he's observing is that it's become so efficient and so centralized, due to paper instruments and the telegraph. All this global trade is basically settling through London, and it's just people updating a ledger between themselves. He's like, money. He's like, gold almost never has to exchange hands. Nobody wants to hold gold, but at the same time, he's noticing that it's levered 20 to 1 because no one ever wants to pull their gold out. And yet, if any one day, if 5% of entities in the system want to pull their gold out, the system's not really solvent. And so he's saying like this, it's both incredibly efficient, but I can see a problem here. And of course, that problem materialized in World War I. And so the way I would describe it is that the fact that commerce now moves so fast that no physical commodity can keep up, for most of the past 150 years, the only alternative has been centralization and abstraction. So we gravitate towards banks and central banks that define what is money, how money moves around. And it became so powerful that even when all those pegs broke relative to gold, we kept using those broken monies rather than using gold, because gold was just inherently too slow to be serving the purpose. And so we find ourselves in a world where there's 160 different fiat currencies, approximately. The top handful of them lose value slowly over time. If you're in the long tail of other currencies, you're losing value far more quickly, right? So, for example, I just got back from Egypt, and the money supply there grows at approximately 20% per year, pretty steadily. And so if your wages are not going up by 20% per year, you're getting diluted. Like your income share is getting diluted compared to the amount of new money that's being created. And at the same time, if your money's not earning at least a 20% interest, your savings are also getting diluted on a regular basis. Um, and that's just one example. There's dozens and dozens of countries in the world with, a couple billion people in it, where they're in an environment where it's very hard for them to one, make it so that their income streams keep up with the global purchasing power. It's very hard for them to accumulate liquid savings. And so, one of the challenges we've actually seen, and I think this is one of the most damning statistics for the current system, is that you can count on one hand the number of developing countries that developed in the past 50 years. Right. So how many countries, we're developing and are now developed? So there's a small handful in Asia. So Singapore, South Korea, there Taiwan. There are a handful of ones that became such powerful exporters and then accumulated capital and then used that capital very well, and they were able to reach what is more or less developed country status by modern standards. And so this is a system that is just very hard to develop if you're not already developed. Most of the countries that we know of developed today developed under like a gold standard or a free banking environment, or basically environments where money in the unit of account was harder. And when you're in an environment where money's softer and all these countries rely on external financing from an entity that can harden that currency whenever they want, soften that currency whenever they want, that's a much harder environment, I would argue, to develop in. And so money's broken, I would say, is largely due to a technological shortcoming. But then that enables all sorts of problematic incentives from there.
In the next segment, Lyn Alden delves into the intricacies of global currencies and the challenges faced by developing nations. She explores the historical evolution of money, emphasizing the centralization and abstraction resulting from rapid technological advancements. Alden predicts a future where countries, much like individuals, will gravitate towards what makes sense economically. She raises crucial questions about the stability of major currencies like the dollar and the euro, pointing to potential challenges on the horizon. Alden suggests that Bitcoin might offer a viable solution, citing its secure, decentralized nature and zero supply dilution as attractive features. However, she acknowledges the need for careful custodianship and discusses techniques like federation and cryptographic proof of reserves. Alden concludes by highlighting the importance of sustainable, robust methods in the evolving crypto market.
As people choose their own monies, they'll gravitate towards what makes sense for them. And in the current environment, a lot of developing countries will gravitate towards dollars. But I think as the dollar approaches, and this is not like a next year story. This is a long-term story playing out. But as our debt crisis and our ability to manage the central ledger eventually goes directionally similar to a lot of these emerging markets, we have to look, in a similar way that Argentinians gravitate towards the dollar. What do Americans gravitate towards, or what do Europeans gravitate towards as currencies like the dollar and the euro themselves start to have those problems? And so I think Bitcoin is one of the answers. And again, there's like a set of probabilities here. So it's like, can Bitcoin remain secure and decentralized? If it can't, then it gets voted off the island in terms of things that people are going to gravitate towards. I guess gold then gets up a notch again. But as long as it can retain its characteristics, it's still this like attractive item out there where you can say, well, there's this global ledger. It's open source. You can bring money anywhere in the world with an internet connection. It has zero supply dilution. People gravitate towards it. And I think it's going to, anytime you try to fractional reserve it, you're very likely to run into breakage within a number of years. And that's not to say you can't have custodians. I think full reserve custodians can still operate in that world. If anything, they would have to, because you need additional layers of speed and convenience. But this is a world where now we have things like You can federate custody, so you're not trusting a single entity, but you're trusting a established group of entities. There's cryptographic proof that you hold the reserves that you say you do. And both of those techniques, for example, have limitations. Like, a federation can still fail. It just more entities, more parties have to fail than one party, but it's still fallible. Similar, proof of reserves can't prove proof of non-liabilities. So when you prove how much assets you have, you can't prove a negative that you don't have a liability that's like off the books, for example. But that still is better than just having a black box where you don't even know what's there, right? So in the free banking era, how do you audit the bank of such and such? You don't. There's no way to do it. So encryption and open source tech gives us it's like in many ways this kind of recent boom bust cycles in the crypto market has been kind of a recreation of the wildcat era. And I think that going forward, the market solidifies towards things that are more sustainable, things that are more robust, either full reserve federations, proof of reserves, these types of things that I think make more sense, because if you don't choose those methods, you're likely to get wrecked.
Thank you for tuning in to this eye-opening analysis. We hope you found this discussion insightful and thought-provoking. Remember, understanding the complexities of the financial landscape is crucial in making informed decisions about your investments. If you appreciated the insights shared in this video, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click on the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts and questions in the comments below. We love hearing from our viewers. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and most importantly, stay ahead in your financial journey. Until next time, take care and invest wisely.